So I was at a home infusion company. That was my first job out of school, and it was great. Place to get started. Great, kind of in between, not hospital, not retail, but this like really interesting space in between that I grew to love. I still do, but I was there for about 7 years. Ended up being there for about 7 years, and probably at around year like 4.5, 5, I was like, okay, like what are we doing here? Like, let's, we're getting comfy, like, let's think about next steps, and was sort of trying to explore what's available. And then sort of around the time where I got more interested in other things, I guess, and kind of trying to see what next steps might be at that point. So that was about 5 years in. Ended up getting a new job. I started the program last April. July 1st, I started a new job. They found me on LinkedIn and I had a new job, which was awesome. It was the first step, I think, like going in, I was like, I don't know if this is like my forever thing or what have you, but it was definitely the first step to get closer to what I think I wanted to do. But have learned a lot. I don't know that it's like the exact right fit for me. Last week I declined a job. They called me today and were like, what do we do? How do we get you to come work for us? I was starting to look again a couple months ago. I felt so much more confident in the skills and what I needed to do. And I wasn't like, oh my God, like, how's this ever gonna work? Like, I was just like, okay, here's the things I gotta do. I've been like talking to random people, like 3 people a week for like a couple months now. And like, as exhausting as it is, I like knew what I had to do. And I was like, okay. And just talking to people and like building a web, and like now I have like resources and I know where to go, and I just feel so much more confident in like what I had to do. I wasn't like floundering. I was like, okay, I'm not happy here, or as happy as I'd like to be. These are things I need to do. Now I can just do them. And it was all stuff that I learned through the program. So it felt it was very empowering and not so scary anymore. One of the things that I was looking for is that I was commuting about 2 to 3 hours a day, probably like 2.5 hours a day. It was like an hour to hour 15 there, and then that back. And I was pretty sick of it. And especially with, in the thick of COVID, it was great. I could make it there in half hours. But as things were picking up, I was like, I can't keep doing this. So this office was 20-minute train ride from my house. And then now actually I'm almost completely remote. I don't really go in much at all, which is nuts. So even just that alone, the lifestyle change there was crazy. I remember that first Friday. So Fridays at my old job would be crazy. It was like, you never knew when you could go home. If you left at 6, it was awesome, but it was just so variable. Could never make plans because I just wouldn't know, could I leave at 5 or is it going to be, are we here till 7 or 8? That first Friday when I came home, I was home at like 5:20 and I was like pacing. I had no idea. I was like, I've never seen my house at this time of day. So like, I didn't know what to do because I was like, this is like 3 hours of my life that I got back. So yeah, that alone was a huge benefit. Finally having a job in the city was great. I got to hit up some happy hours, which I never got to do. And so even just, again, the location was great, but benefits, I think even just, there was so much to learn. It was just all the experiences I've had since then have been, I think, a benefit. You're probably skeptical and nervous and think it's a lot of money. And it is, but it's an investment that even just jumping to my new job that I got, I made that money back essentially. And there's so many invaluable skills that I've learned that can't be taken away from me, that I'm using to progress my life and career in so many different ways that it's priceless in a lot of ways that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. So as scary as it is, I think it was definitely worth it. And you get out of it what you put into it, and it's worth the dive into the scary part, but it pays off if you want it to.